Here's something that still bothers me. September 27th, 1999. Monday Night Raw. Mankind walks through the ring carrying balloons and a sock with a face drawn on it. The Rock sits in the ring looking like a man who has just discovered a stranger eating his food. The segment runs for 28 minutes. Nobody stops it. Mick Foley is one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. I want that on record before what comes next. I hated it. Bloated. Going on and on because nobody had the nerve to cut it. The whole time I kept thinking about the WCW broadcast running simultaneously on the other channel. Perry Saturn versus Conan, not exactly appointment television, and realizing that at least that ended. But here's the part that makes it worse. The segment drew an 8.4 quarter-hour rating, the highest rated non-overrun competitive segment in the history of Monday Night Raw. The audience watching it live lost their minds. A comedy bit with a sock puppet beat everything else on television that night. I sat there alone on a screen, years removed, and felt nothing but impatience. 8 million people watching in real time felt like their chests were going to crack open. The gap between those two experiences is what this video is actually about. Because the rating wasn't wrong. Something was happening in that ring that I was too frustrated to see clearly. Something about what great comedy in professional wrestling actually does, and why the business keeps pretending it doesn't count as real skill. But here's what took me even longer to understand. The comedy itself is only half the story. The other half is what the company does with the people who master it. Professional wrestling has a classification system. Nobody put it in writing, nobody announced it, but it runs through every booking decision, every contract negotiation, every creative meeting where someone looks at a performer and says those two words that end careers. Comedy guy. Once you're the comedy guy, the company extracts everything your commitment generates. The crowd warmth, the merchandise, the ratings bumps, the way your segment makes the match after it land harder. And it keeps you exactly where you are. Your ceiling gets set the moment the classification gets applied. And the crowd's love for you becomes the very thing that funds your own containment. The sock puppet was never the joke. The sock puppet was the mechanism. And Mick Foley is the only man in the history of this business who beat the mechanism before it could beat him. The reason he beat it tells you exactly how the machine works, and exactly who it was designed to grind down. I'm going to take you through the careers of the performers who figured out comedy as craft. And I'm going to show you what the company did with that craft once they had it. Some of these stories end well, most of them don't. And by the time we get to the end, I want you to sit with something uncomfortable, starting with Mick Foley. It starts 12 years before the sock puppet in Providence Civic Center, Rhode Island. (1986). Michael Francis Foley, trained by Dominic DeNucci, first WWF television appearance. He and his partner Les Thornton are squashed by the British Bulldogs in less time than it takes to explain what squashing means. He takes a clothesline from Dynamite Kid, walks away with a jaw injury, a white envelope containing $75, and nothing else. Gets in his car, drives home. He came back. That matters more than the jaw, more than the $75. The pattern that began on June 23, 1986, absorb the cost, return, absorb more, return again, would run for 12 years before the first real laugh arrived. And during those 12 years, something was accumulating in the audience that nobody had a name for yet. 1994, Munich, Cactus Jack versus Vader. The ropes caught Foley's ear on a spot outside the ring. Not grazed it, caught it. The ear tore partially free from his head. He finished the match. Vader won. Foley got in his car. He came back. 1995, Kawasaki Stadium. King of the Deathmatch tournament. Barbed wire and fire. Cactus Jack against Terry Funk. Two men who had agreed, without much discussion, that what the audience felt during the match mattered more than what either of them would feel the morning after. He came back from that, too. June 28, 1998. The Civic Arena, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. King of the Ring. Hell in a Cell. He is thrown from the top of the cage, 16 feet, through the announce table below. He lies in the wreckage for a moment that stretches beyond what the body should survive, and the arena goes somewhere between silence and screaming. And then, he gets up. He is chokeslammed through the roof of the cage and falls into the ring. He lands on thumbtacks. Jim Ross, the most composed voice in professional wrestling, a man who had called matches through blood and injury without flinching, stops being composed.
Will somebody stop the damn match?
After Pittsburgh, the question changed. The body had paid everything the body could pay. The road Foley had been walking since 1986 was ending, and the only question left was what he would do when punishment was no longer a language available to him. He answered it 45 days later. October 5th, 1998. Vince McMahon, storyline injured, in the hospital. Mankind wanted to cheer him up. He arrived with balloons, chocolates, Yerple the Clown, and a sock with a face drawn on it named Mr. Socko. But here's the part nobody was saying out loud. The mandible claw, the weapon that sock was delivering, had been planted as something genuinely disturbing since 1996. A man who submitted to it himself in an empty arena to demonstrate psychological damage. That hold had weight. When it arrived through a cheerful sock named Mr. Socko, the laugh was enormous, because the distance between those two things was enormous. The crowd wasn't laughing at the mandible claw. They were laughing at the gap between what it had meant and what was now delivering it. The comedy was only possible because the darkness had been built first. September 27th, 1999. Rock and Sock Connection. This Is Your Life. 28 minutes. 8.4 quarter-hour rating against a 1.58 on WCW simultaneously. The highest-rated non-overrun competitive segment in Raw history, produced by a comedy bit with a sock puppet. Here is what the company saw when they looked at that number. A great comedy act that drew. Here is what the company missed. The reason it drew. The sock worked because Mick Foley had earned it 12 years before he pulled it out of his trunks. The audience wasn't responding to the absurdity of the sock in isolation. They were responding to the distance between the sock and everything that came before it. The ear in Munich, the thumbtacks in Kansas City, 12 years of a man giving them his body. The company cataloged the outcome and discarded the mechanism. That failure is the rest of this essay. The comedy slot is a one-way door. A performer gets moved into it, a gimmick pops, a creative team runs out of ideas and reaches for laughs as a placeholder. Once they put you there, you stay there. That's not a policy, it's just how it works. The crowd loves them. That love pays real dividends. Merchandise, ratings, the emotional texture of a card, the relief valve that makes the serious matches land harder, the warmth that holds the audience to the parts of the show that aren't working. Load-bearing work, done quietly, without credit, because the reward that actually matters, championship programs, WrestleMania main events, institutional legitimacy, never comes. The ceiling stays low, low enough to never threaten the top of the card, high enough that the performer keeps showing up. The crowd does the rest. They always do. An audience that has genuinely fallen for someone will keep showing up long after the company stopped doing anything to earn it. The crowd fills the gap the writers left. The company collects the return. Al Snow is what this looks like when it works as designed. He spent his early WWF career being cycled through failed gimmick after failed gimmick. Avatar, Shinobi, Leaf Cassidy, losing matches in front of crowds who weren't asked to remember him. In 1997, working for ECW, he found a mannequin head on a Philadelphia sidewalk during a street parade. Paul Heyman put styrofoam replicas in the crowd. Snow played it completely straight, consulting the head with total sincerity, never breaking, never acknowledging the absurdity for a second. The crowd lost their minds. He came back to WWE with genuine momentum, a genuinely over gimmick, and a prop the crowd had decided meant something. He got a hardcore championship run, and a decade of training other people's futures in developmental. The one-way door, working exactly as intended. Snow confirmed the Mr. Sacco idea came directly from his head bit, that the two most iconic props of the Attitude Era were built in conversation, by two performers thinking seriously about what total commitment to an absurd premise could accomplish. WWE got both props. One performer got the ceiling, the other had already been somewhere the ceiling couldn't reach. Foley beat this for one specific reason nobody else has replicated. He got there from the other direction. Legitimate violent threat first. Comedy second. By the time anyone thought to put a ceiling on him, the deposits were already made. The crowd's investment, in what they'd watched him absorb and come back from, was too large for any booking decision to override. He didn't escape the one-way door. He was already on the other side of it before anyone thought to close it. When the company looked at that 8.4 rating, they saw a great comedy act. What was actually in front of them was the world's most credible violent threat doing comedy. Those aren't the same thing. The difference between them is the difference between Madison Square Garden and a mid-card ceiling that follows you for life. The most persistent myth in wrestling is that comedy and main event credibility are mutually exclusive. Foley's championship history is the documented refutation. His first WWF championship came on a December 29, 1998 taping of Raw, aired January 4, 1999. He pinned The Rock following Stone Cold's chairshot interference. Tony Schiavone announced the result live on Nitro with deliberate contempt.
If you're even thinking about changing the channel to our competition, fans, do not. Because we understand that Mick Foley, who wrestled here one time as Cactus Jack, is going to win their world title. Gonna put some butts in the seat.
Because the comedy guy had just won the top title in the company. 600,000 viewers changed channels from WCW to Raw within minutes. The contempt was answered immediately by the audience voting with their hands. His second came at Halftime Heat, January 31st, 1999. Empty arena match against The Rock. The finish involved Foley pinning Rock by trapping him under a wooden pallet weighted down by a forklift. The crowd bought it completely. His third came at SummerSlam 1999. Triple threat. Triple H and Steve Austin, the biggest show of the summer. 3 WWF championships, at least 2 won through methods that would read as farce on paper. They didn't play as farce because Foley had spent years earning the deposit. He'd given the crowd his body in the cell. He'd given them their laughter through the stock. By the time he was pinning people under forklifts, the account had enough in it. January 23rd, 2000. Royal Rumble. Madison Square Garden. Cactus Jack versus Triple H. Street fight. Everything the crowd felt for Mankind transferred completely intact to the most violent version of the same person. 3 years of sock puppets and hospital visits and comedy had built something that survived the character change and amplified what came after. Barbed wire, steel steps, thumbtacks again. The crowd believed in Triple H as a genuine world-class villain because they had watched someone they loved fight him at maximum intensity and fall. Foley made that monster with a sock puppet and a boiler room, and 3 years of giving an audience permission to love someone who shouldn't have been lovable. Then, at the precise moment the story required it, he handed that monster the championship and walked away. The company saw the results. They still didn't understand the mechanism. The proof of that failure was already playing out in the mid-card, while Foley was working Madison Square Garden. Dustin Runnels debuted as Goldust in September 1995. The androgynous presentation, the gold body paint, the cinematic obsessive, designed to produce discomfort. The ceiling came down after WrestleMania 12. Advocacy group pressure. The character cycled through reinventions for 2 decades. WCW as Seven, TNA as Black Rain, without finding the original electricity. October 2013. Cody Rhodes, his half-brother, fighting the Authority. Dustin came to his defense. The matches against The Shield from that period are cited as among the best tag wrestling of the 2000s. As of 2026, Dustin Rhodes is in AEW, having won the TNT Championship in July 2025 at 56 years old. 30 years in variations of the same paint. The crowd that watched across those 30 years was placing a long bet. You watch a performer through the good booking and the bad, the championships and the inexplicable feuds and the periods of total invisibility, and you accumulate a private knowledge of what they're capable of. You carry it. When the moment finally arrives, the payout is in proportion to the weight. Goldust at 57, in the paint he'd worn since 1995, winning a championship. That moment is enormous, not because of what's on the screen, but because of what the audience has been carrying for 3 decades. The ceiling held long enough that the payout had to happen in a different building. That's the system at its gentlest. It doesn't destroy you. It just makes you find your own way out. April 16th, 2007. Raw from Milan. Vince McMahon challenged any fan to fight Intercontinental Champion Umaga. Corelli, planted in the front row, as Santino Marella accepted. With help from Bobby Lashley, he pinned Umaga in his televised debut. 2 IC reigns, a US title, tag gold with Kozlov, the Honkameter. Santino Marella winning Miss WrestleMania, the Cobra. A painted sock on a fist, getting the loudest reactions in the building. 2011 Royal Rumble, TD Garden, Boston. The final 2, Santino Marella and Alberto Del Rio. Boston knew Santino wasn't winning the Royal Rumble. Every piece of available information said so. And then, he set up the Cobra, and the crowd held its breath anyway. That breath, the suspension of certainty in the face of total certainty, is the thing I've been trying to name for years. The crowd didn't believe Santino would win. They believed, for one impossible second, in the possibility that he could. Not the world they were in, a different one. One where the character's logic mattered more than the booking logic. They lived there for 1 second, then Del Rio eliminated him and they came back. That is the most valuable thing professional wrestling can produce. Most performers never give an audience that feeling once in their entire career. A neck injury ended his career in 2014. He founded Battle Arts Academy in Ontario. His daughter competes in NXT. He made it out with his integrity intact. That's more than most people in this essay managed inside that building. Chavo Guerrero Jr. His grandfather, Gory Guerrero, pioneered lucha libre. His uncle Eddie is one of the greatest professional wrestlers who ever lived. Chavo himself was legitimately skilled, not carried by the name skilled, actually skilled. March 30th, 2008. WrestleMania 24. The first and only time the ECW World Championship was defended at WrestleMania. 11 seconds. Kane. The match ended before most of the arena had settled into their seats. The crowd laughed. Of course they laughed. It was designed to produce that reaction. Shocking brevity, anticlimax, a title match lasting less time than the entrance. The crowd laughed and the segment moved on. Here is what was happening underneath the laugh. The ECW Championship had once meant something. 11 seconds on the biggest card of the year was the company's entire institutional opinion of the ECW revival, delivered in one booking decision. The title didn't recover. A nobody losing in 11 seconds is filler. A Guerrero losing in 11 seconds is a statement. The burial was the message, and Chavo's legitimate credentials were the fuel that made it legible. He said in interviews the match was his idea, his biggest WrestleMania payday. He made peace with it. His peace is his own. The public transaction is separate. Then, July through October 2009. A prolonged feud with Hornswoggle. Blindfold matches. Texas bull rope matches. Weekly defeats. A man with genuine credentials beaten systematically every week to make a novelty act look credible. The crowd laughed at those too. Here's the distinction the business keeps pretending doesn't exist. Both the Rock and Sock connection and what was done to Chavo Guerrero made crowds laugh. The difference is entirely in what the comedy was doing to the performers standing while the crowd was laughing. Rock and Sock was a deposit. The Hornswoggle feud was an erasure. The promoter always knows which one they're running. The crowd doesn't always know. The laugh covers the discomfort. The crowd goes home having laughed. Nobody sits with the feeling that something was wrong, and the machine gets what it needed without anyone naming what just happened. I've laughed at things in wrestling I'd be angry about if I sat with them long enough. Chavo Guerrero deserved better. The Guerrero name had earned better. That's the part of this that's hardest to look at. Zack Ryder launches a True Long Island Story on YouTube on February 17, 2011. 75 episodes. His own equipment. His own apartment. He built an audience the institution hadn't built for him. Invented the catchphrases they hadn't given him.
Woo, woo, woo! You know it!
Built a connection they hadn't created. By hand, from scratch, without permission. He wasn't buried. He was unscheduled. A name on a roster that 5 hours of weekly television had no current use for.
Why isn't Zack Ryder on television?
Broskies want him on Raw.
Yeah. Oh, you and which other one?
I think there are a lot of us, right?
What, 3 or 4 maybe? Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, probably for that reason. There's the 3 or the 4. No, listen, we got a lot of young guys.
So he bypassed the system entirely. Arenas started chanting his name during segments featuring The Rock and John Cena. Not because anyone coordinated it, because a fan base had formed an independent judgment and brought it into a building where the institution had no editorial control. At TLC December 18, 2011, Ryder defeated Dolph Ziggler for the United States Championship. The crowd reaction was the sound an arena makes when it understands its sustained collective effort has produced a result. Then the company spent the following months methodically dismantling every piece of it. Kane attacked him. Wheelchair. Title lost to Swagger. At WrestleMania 28, his on-screen love interest delivered a low blow that cost his team the match. WWE took over production of the YouTube show, stripped out everything that made it work, and canceled it. What happened to Aaron Stevens the following year was the same refusal, from the inside. Stevens trained under Killer Kowalski. Released in 2007, sharpened everything on the independents. Came back in April 2012 as Damien Sandow, the intellectual savior of the masses. Bathrobe, wineglass microphone grip, genuine contempt for the audience delivered with the conviction of a man who actually believes it. Real heat. Team Rhodes Scholars with Cody Rhodes, one of the better tag teams of that era. July 2013. Money in the Bank briefcase. 1 win and 12 losses on television before the cash-in. 12 losses for the man holding a guaranteed world championship match. October 2013. He cashed in against an injured John Cena, worked the arm methodically before the bell, and lost cleanly. First person in Money in the Bank history to fail a cash-in outright. The ceiling had been set before the crowd had a chance to vote. Then, Damien Mizdow, the Miz's sycophantic stunt double. When the Miz took a bump inside the ring, Mizdow threw himself to the floor outside it. Phantom bumps. The Miz held real tag team championship belts. Sandow carried toy replicas. The crowd cheered the toy belt. What was happening in those arenas was not simple comedy appreciation. The crowd understood exactly what they were watching, that the gimmick was a ceiling, a communication of what the company thought of him. Their response was to refuse the communication, to take the humiliation and treat it as a heroic narrative, to cheer loudest for the man carrying the plastic, to transform institutional contempt into a story about dignity. WrestleMania 31, Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. The natural endpoint was right there. Mizdow turns on the Miz, the building erupts. 18 months of the crowd's work reaches its ending. They were already at the threshold. Big Show eliminated him. The institution removed the crossing at the moment of maximum traffic. A parody tag team with Curtis Axel followed and collapsed immediately. He was released in May 2016. He thrived afterward. impact, NWA, creative fulfillment on his own terms. But thriving elsewhere is not the same as the crowd's verdict being honored inside the building where it was earned. Ryder built the bridge himself. The institution tore it down because they hadn't built it. Sandow built the crowd's trust from inside the system. The institution looked at what he'd built and kept the ceiling exactly where it was. Two different methods, the same result. The gap is still there. Nobody has built across it since. The New Day began forming on television in July 2014. Their first match together aired November 28, 2014. The crowd received it with the specific silence wrestling audience is reserved for things they find embarrassing on the performer's behalf. The heel turn was not a writing team decision. It was a crowd decision. At the Raw following WrestleMania 31, the audience started chanting "New Day sucks" in perfect rhythm to the group's own clapping.
They suck! New Day sucks! New Day sucks! New Day sucks!
Kingston, Big E, and Woods recognized what was happening and leaned in. Francesca arrived. A trombone, played with the sincerity of a man who had decided this was the most important instrument in the world. The act evolved from there. The pancakes came later, somewhere around 2018, thrown into the crowd with a specificity and commitment that made them permanent. March 26, 2019. SmackDown. Tag Team Gauntlet. Kingston barred from ringside. Big E and Woods won it themselves. Survived Gallows and Anderson, then Rusev and Nakamura. The Usos forfeited when their turn came. A spontaneous acknowledgement of what was happening in the building. Then Bryan and Rowan fell. That SmackDown produced the single most emotionally invested crowd in years, because years of stored warmth finally had somewhere to go. At WrestleMania 35, Kingston defeated Daniel Bryan for the WWE Championship. He stored pancakes inside the belt. The comedy was never separate from the championship. The comedy was the reason the championship meant what it meant. Without years of complete commitment to something joyful and specific, it's a title change. With them, it's something the people in that building carry for the rest of their lives. Then, October 4th, 2019. First SmackDown on Fox. The biggest audience in years. Kofi Kingston lost the WWE Championship to Brock Lesnar in 7 seconds. The institution deployed the largest crowd it had gathered in years to communicate, with maximum efficiency, what it thought Kofi Mania had actually been worth. Big E got a well-earned WWE Championship run in late 2021. Then fractures to his C1 and C6 vertebrae on March 11th, 2022. A live SmackDown broadcast. Ridge Holland's overhead belly-to-belly suplex sending him outside the ring and landing wrong, in front of the cameras, on television, that ended his in-ring career.
I can't thank all of you beautiful people enough for all of your concern and your messages. It's very heartwarming. I can move all my digits. You see that? That's nice. That's always a good thing. Strength feels fine, but unfortunately, right now, they tell me my neck is broken. So there's that. But once again, thank you, everybody. I'm gonna be all right. I'll be good. Don't worry. Go to sleep. Don't worry about old me. But for real, thank you. And I appreciate all of you.
In May 2026, TKO approached Kingston and Woods about restructuring their contracts. A pay cut. They declined and mutually parted ways with the company. Nearly 12 years. Official disbanding. The Machine's final accounting of what Kofi Mania had been worth arrived not in 7 seconds this time, but in a contract offer both men looked at and walked away from. The Machine held the ceiling for years after the crowd had demonstrated they were ready for it to move. The pop at WrestleMania 35 was the size it was, partly because of how long it had been delayed. Then the company called it a success story and maintained the system that had produced the delay. They store. They spend. They go home carrying whatever they couldn't spend. They come back the next week and start storing again. I've done this my entire life. I've never once asked whether the terms were fair. The one time in recent memory the crowd forced WWE's hand badly enough that the company had no viable alternative, the performer was Sami Zayn. In 2022, WWE's dominant narrative was the bloodline. Roman Reigns, the self-proclaimed tribal chief, his family projecting absolute authority over the locker room. Into this came Zayn, a performer the company had spent years struggling to place, after his natural energy kept generating crowd reactions they hadn't planned for. The solution? Honorary Uce, the outsider accepted into the inner circle who desperately, sincerely believed the acceptance was real. The clown at the king's table. For 8 months, he played it completely straight. Full commitment, no winking, total fidelity to the internal logic of a man who had been given something he wanted more than anything, and could not see it was being held over him. The comedy was real, and it was funny. But what the crowd was accumulating over those 8 months wasn't appreciation for a comedy performance. It was something closer to dread, the helpless feeling of watching a person give everything to a situation that everyone in the arena can see is going to destroy them, while hoping against all logic that it won't. That feeling, held for 8 months, is not a small thing. January 28th, 2023. Royal Rumble. San Antonio. Roman Reigns stands in the ring and has to choose between Sami Zayn and the Bloodline. What happened in that arena, in the weeks that followed, and ultimately at WrestleMania 39 in Los Angeles, was not the company executing a plan. It was the company responding to a crowd that had grown loud enough and sustained enough that ignoring it would have been visibly, measurably costly. WWE's internal read on Zayn had been consistently low, still understood in the booking infrastructure as a comedy act with a high ceiling, rather than a main event performer with an urgent story. The crowd corrected that understanding by making the alternative untenable. The label bent under the weight of what they'd built. Foley in 2000. Zayn in 2023. Both outcomes required the crowd's investment to grow large enough to overwhelm the booking infrastructure's preference for containment. Both are the exception, and both are, if you look at the pattern carefully, the only opening the system leaves available, not a flaw in the design. The one release valve it can never quite close all the way. Nick Nemeth wrestled collegiately at Kent State. 121 career wins. 3 All-Mid-American Conference championships. Accepted to Arizona State Law School before a WWE tryout changed the calculation. He debuted as Nikki, a male cheerleader in the Spirit Squad. Comedic fodder for D-Generation X to dismantle. Then developmental. Then September 2008, Dolph Ziggler. Here's what Ziggler could do that almost nobody else in this business has done. Across 2 decades, at his level, he could make any move from any opponent look like it might actually end the match. Roman Reigns' spear, Goldberg's spear, a brogue kick from Sheamus, a basic clothesline from a mid-card opponent the audience had no reason to fear. The specific arc, the hyperextension, the rotation of a man who has spent a career learning how bodies fall, and how to make falling read as genuine consequence. He made bad matches good. He made good matches great. He made prospects look like stars years before the booking had established the claim. April 8th, 2013. Raw after WrestleMania 29. Alberto Del Rio, vulnerable. Ziggler running down the ramp with the briefcase. The crowd already standing before the music registered. One of the loudest sustained pops of the modern era. The gate opened. Then a concussion. Medical clearance required. When he returned, WWE booked him to lose the title to Del Rio at Payback. The institution's consistent response to an injured champion? Close the gate before the traffic builds. The reign that should have ended 19 years of the closed ceiling ended before it had time to breathe. His final WWE contract was offered specifically to prevent him from signing with AEW. Not because the company had plans for him, because his absence would make the competition's building more stable. He sent emails requesting to be used or released.
Wrote a really, really long email to Vince, Hunter, Bruce. You're using me for a role that a local would be in, but you're paying me as the WrestleMania main eventer. This is bad for you and this is bad for me.
So did you ask for your release?
Yes. And nobody wrote me back except for Vince. He goes, give me 1 week. It's a lot to process. I said, okay. And the next week I was on a list of people who were released. And I went, okay, I guess I'm out.
He thought about it.
So yeah, so it worked out. If they were not in the process.
Collected a paycheck from home for 6 months, paying him specifically not to work. Not because he had failed, but because he could not be permitted to succeed somewhere else. Wrestle Kingdom 18, January 4th, 2024. New Japan Pro Wrestling. Nick Nemeth appeared in the front row, setting his sights on the newly minted IWGP Global Heavyweight Championship. A month later, at the New Beginning in Sapporo, he won it in his first official match. Most people only know R-Truth as the comedy act. They don't know what he was when a company gave him real space. When his first WWF contract expired in 2002, he walked into TNA and defeated Ken Shamrock for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, Lou Thez, Harley Race, Ric Flair's title, the oldest championship in wrestling. For the first time in its history, it belonged to a black man. The WWE gimmick was one mode of a performer who'd already proven he could do everything. When he returned in 2008, he built something unprecedented without being handed main events. The 2011 heel run, Conspiracies, Little Jimmy, Bottled Water, worked because the humanity underneath was undeniable. Survivor Series, Madison Square Garden. Awesome Truth versus Cena and Rock. Biggest box office tag match of the decade. Truth held his own. Then the 24/7 Championship in 2019. A novelty belt that was never supposed to matter. Truth made it matter. 54 reigns, title changes on golf courses, airplanes, during a wedding. His feud with Drake Maverick generated more genuine warmth than most feuds involving the major titles. During the pandemic, when crowds disappeared and the product had nothing to run on, he was the face of joy when joy felt genuinely rare. Then Nick Khan put him on the chopping block. Cena added him to the retirement tour as a last effort to demonstrate his friend's value. 1 week later, released. No video, no package. Tributes poured in anyway. Thank You Truth trended worldwide. The next Raw, arenas chanted for him to empty air. WWE eventually brought him back, because the room felt different without him. He was never the comic relief. He was the infrastructure. Meet Danhausen. He is very nice, very evil. He offers opponents jars of teeth as peace offerings. He is, by every observable metric, an absolute lunatic. Yet he is the most over guy in every building he steps in. He built his audience before any promotion asked him to. Years of YouTube vlogs, a Patreon, character-driven social media that treated wrestling matches as secondary to the broader universe he was constructing. By the time Ring of Honor signed him in 2020, he had already proven a dedicated crowd could be assembled from scratch, without permission. AEW got him first and didn't know what to do with him. A promotion ideologically committed to in-ring excellence will always struggle with a performer whose value is almost entirely located somewhere else. The ceiling came down. An injury accelerated it. By the time his contract expired in early 2026, the relationship had been functionally over for 2 years. WWE signed him, and here is where the story turns strange. At WrestleMania 42, having wrestled 0 official matches for the company, Danhausen finished as a top 3 merchandise seller for the entire weekend, behind only reigning champions CM Punk and Cody Rhodes. He outsold Roman Reigns. Fanatics ran emergency restocks to keep the arena shelves populated. The machine looked at those numbers and understood something it had spent 30 years failing to understand about everyone else in this essay. That the warmth a crowd carries for a performer converts directly into revenue. And that revenue doesn't require a championship program to materialize. Whether that represents progress or the system's final, most elegant evolution, learning to monetize the comedy performer without even the pretense that the ceiling might move is a question the numbers don't answer. Danhausen did what Zack Ryder did. The difference is he did it long enough and consistently enough that by the time WWE signed him, the audience had nowhere else to go. January 23rd, 2000. Madison Square Garden. Mick Foley walks to the ring as Cactus Jack. That name. In that building. On that night. The crowd's reaction didn't come from a video package. It didn't come from a promo. It came from 3 years of accumulation. The Mankind vignettes, the boiler room, the thumbtacks, and then the hospital visit, and Mr. Sacco, and This Is Your Life, and the audience laughing at this man until they loved him more than they'd loved almost anyone on the roster. Every comedy moment had been a deposit in a shared emotional account. Cactus Jack walked out that night and made a single enormous withdrawal, and the crowd's response was the sound of that account paying out. The comedy didn't soften the street fight. The comedy made the street fight possible. Foley beat the machine because he came at it from the wrong direction. He was already past the classification before they tried to apply it. He's the exception that proves the rule. The rule is everything else in this video. Al Snow invented a comedy mechanic that changed what the funny stuff could do in this business, earned a training legacy that shaped multiple generations of performers, and spent his peak years losing mid-card matches while the company collected the warmth his commitment generated. Santino Marella mastered his lane so completely, the company had no choice but to keep using him for a decade, and built an academy with what he learned. Goldust spent 30 years committing completely to the most audacious character in the company's history, and had to go somewhere else to win the championship that commitment had earned. Zack Ryder built a genuine crowd from his bedroom, and the company spent 8 years of his prime making sure the returns went to them. The New Day built a decade of crowd love, and the company held Kofi Kingston's ceiling for 11 years before the crowd made it impossible to hold any longer. R-Truth spent 18 years being the thing every card needed, and nobody gave the main event to, and the company released him without a tribute video. Chavo Guerrero got 11 seconds at WrestleMania. Damian Sandow figured out every piece of the craft, and watched management maintain his preset ceiling until the window closed. Nick Nemeth spent 19 years making everyone around him look better than they were. 19 years of the crowd showing up, and the company not following. Then he left and immediately won championships on 3 continents. The building that spent a decade finding reasons not to push him produced the proof of what he was the moment he walked out the door. Here's the thing I need you to sit with. You loved all of them. You chanted for Ryder in 2011. You laughed at the sock. You sang New Day's theme. You bought Truth's merchandise. You felt Kofi Mania in your chest. You screamed when Ziggler cashed in. You stored up everything these performers built for you. Every pop, every laugh, every moment where the comedy made the match after it land harder. And you kept coming back. And the company knew you'd keep coming back. And they built the machine on that knowledge. Your love is the fuel. Your love is what makes the comedy classification profitable. The crowd warmth that the company monetizes at the expense of the performer's ceilings is crowd warmth you generated. You are the bank. They are the account. And the withdrawals were always made by someone who never intended to pay it back. I still think This Is Your Life went on too long. I still flip past it. But the number is real. 8.4 against a 1.58.